Hello, I'm Dennis Pervinsky, and welcome to Grandpa Dennis's Woodturning Studio. Today's project is a pretty straightforward burl. This is a birch burl. It's been in my shop for probably 20 years, maybe 25 years. It's dry for sure. It's going to be 11 inches in diameter, and it's 7 inches deep. It's pretty straightforward. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting grain in there once it's polished out. But I'm going to try and do something different with it. I don't want just plain bowls out of this. For sure, I'm going to try and do some coring with this, but I'm also looking at trying to do something more decorative, maybe some carving. Who knows? I'll wait and see when I get it on the lathe and start dealing with it. This is kind of the essence of wood turning. You start off with a plan, you've got this image in your mind of what you want to do, and some of the wood turners can follow through absolutely perfectly and get it done exactly how they planned it out. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not good enough to do that. What I end up doing is starting the project and looking at the piece and how it's developing, looking at the grain, looking at the size of it. And maybe if I did this or did that, when I start turning and it goes into a different shape, maybe that's the shape I want. So I do a lot of adjusting as I go all the way through until the final shape is done. I don't know, is that a better wood turner than the one that has the plan in his mind and reaches the plan? We'll see. That's the way I do it. Okay, let's get started. Finding the centers on these burls is often pretty difficult. The burl dips down to about this level here, but at about this level there. So it's out of balance if I left it as this being flat. So I'm going to want to raise this end up a little bit, like so. And it's dipping down here, but it goes to here. So again, I'm going to want to do that. So it's going to be a little tricky in getting the center. On this top part, I think that's a little bit easier. So that's equidistant pretty much. A little bit more from there to there. Now this way, that should be it there. Now to get that centered, I'll have to put this on the lathe to get this center part, because I've got to do adjustments this way and that way, and that's best done on the lathe. I am using my laser pointer to see where the best position should be to take best advantage of the burl. Nope, have to twist it a bit to get this part in, because on the opposite side it's there. On this side I want it there. So I think I just need a little twisting. Let's see how that operates. Burls are rare and expensive pieces of wood, So I want to use as much of the piece as I can and not waste any of the fancy grain. That's pretty darn good. And that's good. Here's another tip for wood turners. I've got the spindle locked. I've got as much pressure as I could put onto my tailstock going this way to try and squeeze it together. Now that the spindle is locked, I try and move this a little bit. That loosens it up a bit, and now I can tighten it just a little bit more. Now it's not budging. I'm flattening the bottom of the piece in preparation for the waste block. Now I've got designer epoxy, 2-hour epoxy glue on both sides. This is my waste block. And now I have to get it even. I've drawn circles on there while it was still between centers, so I know where the centers are. So I'm looking at the spaces in there, and that's just about perfect. So I tighten up the pressure. This is 2-hour epoxy, but I usually do this at the end of the day and leave it overnight. Come back in the morning and it is solid. Then I can turn this down to make a tenon, and I could put my stronghold chuck onto that. I think one of the things is this feature in here of all the bark. If I turn that off, I'm reducing the diameter of the bowl significantly. So my plan right now would be to leave as much of this on as possible. It becomes a feature. And I might even leave all of these protrusions in here as well. We'll see. So it's on to turning the tenon on the waste block to fit the profile jaws on my one-way stronghold chuck. The piece is now reversed, and it's time to true up the top of the bowl in preparation for coring. I've got the one-way coring system set up. I'm going to core this out. It's going to be about up to here deep. I'm just going to get the one bowl out that I think is usable. And I'll leave all of this unfinished edging here and look at that later, because I'm not quite sure which parts of that I want to keep and which ones I don't. And this can always be cleaned up on when I do the next bowl. So let's see how this is going to work. Now to do a little bit more work on the outside and then make some decisions. I want to save this bark, especially this dark brown color, because it really pops against the whiter type color of the birch. So I'll be using the CA glue from Designer Epoxy, and I'm using the thin one so that it soaks in to this bark. That was the thick version of the CA glue. I'm letting it soak in and then hitting it again and soaking in and soaking in. I don't want to put too much of the accelerator on it because I want it to soak in deeper. There's quite a gap along here. So I'll come back in about 10 minutes and we'll see how that works. My hydraulic carving vise that I have configured for fitting my faceplates and chucks from my lathe. I can now position the bowl in any direction and securely lock it in place. Time to burn in some wheat sheaves. Let's see if I can make this look half decent. Not bad for my first time. Wheat is especially symbolic for me because the city I live in is called the Wheat City. The bowl is now back on the lathe for final sanding, and I'll go up to as high as 800 grit. I use alcohol to get rid of the fine dust before I apply the finish. It's now time to turn off the tenon at the bottom. Now the trick is you've got to reverse this and bring up your tailstock to give support here and to get the friction so that the bowl can move and you can do the turning. However, how do you center that piece? That's the real trick. And here's the secret weapon for that. This is called a live center adapter. Here's my threads for the chuck. They're on the top of this adapter. That screws in there. And this part screws into the threads that are on the live center. This live center adapter is available from One Way Tools, oneway.ca. It's under $50 and they're made especially for the threads that are on your lathe so that it'll always fit the attachments, whether it's a faceplate or a chuck for your particular lathe. I have the adapter put onto the chuck. Now I'll just thread it onto the live center. Now, this bowl is completely centered. It's the same center as was on the other side. Now I've got my vacuum chuck put on here. Now when I push the bowl against the vacuum chuck, it's going to now be centered on this part as well. I can then remove the chuck and then have access to the bottom to clean it up. The vacuum chuck is engaged, and I've got vacuum pressure at about 27 inches. 28 is basically the maximum I've gotten from my vacuum system. So it's at 27 and a half. This adapter is well worth the effort and the price to get it. It's not expensive, but it sure helps you get that centered and saves you a lot of time and fuss. Now that I have that centered, I can turn this foot, I can turn this tenon down all the way to the bowl. However, because the vacuum chuck isn't a very super secure system, if I get a slight catch here, there's a chance that I could break the seal and the bowl can come off. So I do have the center here where I made my tendon in the first place. I'm going to move my tailstock up to that, apply some pressure, and then I'll turn away the majority of this, and I'll get this foot shaped a little nicer and get rid of all of the chatter that's down in here, and true up the bottom of the foot that will be resting on the tabletop. Get that trued up, try and concave the rest of the bottom, and then what's left at the end is just a tiny stub which I can saw off and finish the rest by hand. Having a vacuum system on a lathe is an expensive proposition. I think you could spend up to $1,000 to get a vacuum system for your lathe. However, you can still accomplish this without a vacuum system. Instead of a dedicated vacuum chuck, you could have a faceplate, then turn a block of wood with the measurements that would fit the inside of your bowl. All you need is some very thin rubber or even some leather on this side. Put that on your lathe, reverse your bowl, and put it against this jam chuck. You can then bring your tailstock up and give it support, so now you're turning between centers. And the pressure you have from your tailstock gives you the friction that keeps that in place. The problem with that is centering your tailstock to the wood, and that just requires a little bit of finessing. You'll have a center mark on your tenon down here. That was made when you first made the tendon. However, it's this side that's against the jam chuck that you have to maneuver around to get it nice and centered. The better centered this is, the better your foot is going to be. And when your bowl then sits on a table, it doesn't sit like this or like that. It sits perfectly flat. got this nub down to about a 1/2 inch holding on to the wood. You could probably break that off. Unfortunately, if you do, there are times when the fibers from that nub will go into the bottom of the bowl and you'll tear out a significant piece in there. So the safe way is to just cut it off with a saw, and then you can do hand sanding or power sanding with the bottom. This sanding doesn't have to be super accurate as long as you've got a nice finished product on the bottom. This is the part that has to be accurate and perfectly flat, and because this bowl is centered, that is perfectly flat. The vacuum chuck is holding the bowl on. I'm going to let that finish soak in for a bit. You'll see the different sort of patterns in the wood. And as you turn it, it just shimmers. After a few minutes, I'll do some more and some more until I think that it's saturated. Then I'll wipe it right off, let it set up for another few minutes, and then reverse the bowl so I could do the inside. Again, that's one of the benefits of having the vacuum chuck. It's holding it in place. However, this can all be done off the lathe as well. It's a little trickier and it just requires a little bit more work. I've wiped off the excess. Now it's time to reverse it. I've got a good seal. I'm at 25 inches, not as much as the other way, but there were some imperfections in the foot. So that's good enough because I'm not putting a lot of pressure or a lot of speed on this. And centering it doesn't matter that much because I'm just applying finish. It's basically a method of holding the bowl in one place as I'm doing the finish. This wood is very, very dry, so it does soak up a lot of finish. I'll let that soak in for a little bit and then apply some more and then wipe it off. Here's the finished bowl. 6 inches in height, 10 inches in diameter, and 1/2 inch at its thickest part. If I went any thinner, then I'd be cutting this inside part, would go deeper down, and it would come out here and I'd get a hole in the bowl. The burning in of the wheat sheaves turned out to be rather nice. The chatoyance on this particular bowl is quite nice. It gives a real shimmer as the light reflects off of the different cells in different directions. It's really quite nice. And that's a characteristic of all of my birch burls that are rather smooth. The ones that look like little bird's eye throughout are quite a bit different. This has none of that figure in it. The hardest part of this project was to center the bowl, to find out where the centers were that make the best use out of the burl. I have to come up with a better system for that. It was very time consuming and quite difficult to do. So we'll keep an eye on that. Another reminder, please subscribe if you like this video. And in particular, hit the like button if you enjoyed it. A comment would really go a long way to help me. So what I want to find out is there a simpler way to measure and do the centers of the bowls? Because not only did I have to get the center this way, I also had to move it like that and like that. So if there's a better way to do that, I would sure like to find that out. So stay tuned for a close-up of this, and hopefully you'll be able to see the shimmer in there in the camera. So until the next time, keep on turning.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. Doesn't matter if my beard is gray. Just listen, I have something to say.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. And this old goat has something to say. So just keep learning, for Grandpa Dennis is turning.